There are basically three different types of problems. There's the types where you're finding the sides and you multiply. There's the types where you find the side and you're dividing. And then there's the type where you're finding an angle. So I'm going to start with the ones where you're finding an angle. So if you're looking for this angle, that's when we use the inverse. That's the only time you use inverse. You only use inverse when you're looking for an angle measurement. Then we are going to label the sides. So across from the right angle, we have the hypotenuse, which we're not given, so we don't need to worry about it. Across from angle L is 13, that's the opposite, and then adjacent. All right, so thinking back on our trig functions, we have sine equals opposite over hypotenuse. We have cosine, which is adjacent over hypotenuse. And we have tangent, which is opposite over adjacent. All right, so if we were given the opposite and the adjacent, which function would we use? We would use the tangent function because that function requires the opposite and the adjacent sides. So we're looking for tangent of angle L because we don't know what angle L is. That's what we're finding. And that would be equal to the opposite, 13, over the adjacent, which is 9. So again, we use the inverse. Tangent inverse of 13 over 9. You'll then go to your calculator and plug that in. All right, so on your calculator, we go to trig, and then we go to tangent inverse for this case, since our problem was tangent inverse of 13 over 9, which gives us this, and we have to round. Remember, the 4 tells us to keep the 0 the same, so it's 55.30 degrees. 55.30 degrees. So we found this angle measurement. All right, so there's my example of finding an angle. Remember that when you're finding an angle, you use the inverse. That's the only time you'll use inverse. And remember, it could be any of these functions. It's not always the tangent function. It depends on what sides they give you. So you focus on the angle you're looking for and label your sides from there. Then decide which function you're going to use given the sides it gives us. So it gave us opposite and adjacent, so we use tangent. If it gave us adjacent and hypotenuse, we would use cosine. And if it gives us opposite and hypotenuse, then we use sine. All right. Now we're finding a side length, so we don't need to worry about the inverse anymore. But we're going to use the angle it gives us as a reference. So it gave us the 35-degree angle. Across from the right angle is the hypotenuse. Opposite from 35 degrees is this x. And then it doesn't give us anything here, so we don't need to worry about that. So again, we have to think about which trigonometric function we would use. We were given the opposite and the hypotenuse. So which one would we use? We would use sine. It's giving us opposite over hypotenuse. So sine of angle T, which is 35, so sine of 35 equals opposite over hypotenuse. So x over 20. It does matter which order you put this in. Okay, next we would be solving for x, so we have to cross multiply. In order to do that, we need two fractions, so we have to turn this into a fraction by putting it over 1. Then we cross multiply. X times 1 is x. Sine of 35 times 20. So x equals sine of 35 times 20. Then we would solve for x. X is already alone, so I just have to simplify this side. Sine of 35 times 20. So to do that, we go to trig, sine of 35, and make sure you go outside of the parentheses to multiply by 20. And you get this. We have to round to the nearest hundredth, so the 1 tells us to keep it the same, meaning that that side is 11.47. So this side length is 11.47. Okay, one more where we have to find the side length. So this is the side we're looking for, which means, again, we're not using inverse. Inverse you only use when you're looking for an angle measurement. Here we're looking for a side. So we just set it up based off the angle given to us. So it gives us this angle is 21 degrees. So we label our sides. We have across from the right angle is the hypotenuse. Across from the side given to us is the opposite side. And then it does not give us this side, so we don't have to worry about it. So it gives us opposite and hypotenuse. Which one would we use? Which trigonometric function? We would use sine because it gives us the opposite and the hypotenuse. Okay, so sine of 21 degrees equals opposite over hypotenuse. So 12 over x. All right, and then to solve for x, we need to cross multiply. So I have to put this over 1 to make it a fraction. And then we multiply. 12 times 1 is 12 equals sine of 21 times x. Now, in this case, we don't have x alone. So we have to get x alone by doing the opposite operations. Just like when you're solving for x, if this was 3x, you would divide by 3, but this is sine of 21 times x. So we divide by sine of 21. So that these can cancel and you'll get x alone. But remember, whatever you do to one side, we have to do to the other side. So sine of 21. Plug this into your calculator, you get 12 divided by sine of 21. So 12 divided by, and then we go to trig sine of 21. We get 33.49. The 5 tells us to round up. So 33.48 becomes 33.49. Which means the side length is 33.49. All right, and that is my review. If you want, I left a blank copy on OneNote, but that should help you with the parlay activity. Or sorry, that should help you with the Go Formative quiz that is due Friday by midnight.